Ago, I watched the live stream of the NDT finals round in 2023 between Wake Forest RT and Michigan PP. It was a K round. You should go watch it if you haven't already. It's a very interesting round, and it's been kind of a source of heated discussion in the policy community. And in fact, it's been the source of some academic articles that have been published recently as well. And when I watched it, this wasn't like my first exposure to K debate by any means, but I think this was the first time I really started thinking critically about K debate. And it raised a lot of questions. So then naturally, I went and I talked to my policy friends. I went and talked to people who did policy, who coached policy. And I asked them about this round. I asked them about K debate in general. And it's kind of puzzling. They all kind of had, different degrees of this, but they all kind of had the same response, which is, and maybe this is just the group of people I was talking to, but a lot of them were like, there's nothing Michigan really could have done differently. They chose the perfect strategy. Maybe the execution wasn't the best. Or some of them said, Michigan should have just won. And I thought like, okay, clearly this is a strategy that does work sometimes. It's like tried and tested or whatever. But it seems ridiculous to me that this is like the strategy, right? Like I guess what I would call refusing the call of the chorus, in the words of Wake. It's like the only strategy. Like certainly it is a strategy, but it's weird to me that they seem to dismiss the alternatives. And I think there are alternatives. Like I was thinking just like a year ago or so, like what would have happened if Michigan actually like took up the call of the chorus and like tried to engage genuinely in a discussion about black debate or blackness in debate, and about different models of debate and how they foster these kinds of important, productive discussions and advance these kinds of important things like inclusion, equity, what these concepts of fairness really mean in the context of race and debate. And I asked some people about it. Most notably, I remember like very vividly asking like one policy coach in Taiwan about this. And his response, which was echoed by a lot of other people, was like, dude, they would have gotten bodied. Like if Michigan had tried to engage in at the same level as Wake Forest would have just been like, you're not black. And that sort of just would have been the end of it. GG, you know? And this, I thought like that can't possibly be true, right? Like, I don't know. If that were the case, then I guess the call to action, right? This like call to engage the chorus would not really be genuine, and there wouldn't really be like a possibility for a productive conversation that Wake seems to be trying to have, or like this kind of actual reckoning. And the policy coach kind of just like laughed and was like, well, that's the point, right? They don't want to have a productive discussion. They want reparations. And this really, really stuck with me, I think. I've spent the past couple of years thinking about ways to actually engage Ks like this and imagining like what would actually happen if you did this and how might this both be legitimately more productive and also maybe even a better strategy against the K than just going for normal like T framework, couple theory shells or something like that. And the idea that I settled on is essentially this. Number one, I don't think that K teams are actually ready, by and large, to have someone genuinely engage them. They're prepared on T. Like they've done a million drills on T, right? They're ready to debate you refusing their call. I'm not really sure they know what to do if you take them up on it. And like I'm sure they know a little bit, but just relatively speaking, I think they're much more prepared for debating the refusal. And I don't really mean by taking them up, I don't really mean traditional like KVK. Like I think that's kind of weird as well. I don't mean contesting their theory of power and being like there's a different root cause, there's a different explanation of this. I don't even necessarily mean like saying their method is bad or there's a better method that it crowds out or something. I mean putting forth an equivalent contribution to the dialogue. And as a result, I think there's sort of two ways this round could go. Either A, and this is the optimistic scenario, you take them up on this call. You have some sort of equivalent contribution to the dialogue, whatever that means. You participate in discussion with your engagement, and then they participate back, right? They engage in your engagement. And then I think you actually have a decent chance of winning relative to a lot of other strategies. I don't know that they would actually have the same capacity to engage you on this, or the same like level of prep on it at least. The second alternative, right? The second possibility is that they use some way. of shutting off your engagement from the ballot, right? You try to engage in their discussion. They say, fine, you can engage, but you can't win off of this engagement. I think there's kind of two ways they could do this. Like they could either say something about the role of the negative or the role of the affirmative, right? There's burdens in debate. This is how debate works. You have to do something different. You have to contest what we said. If what we said is true and you agree, then we just win. It is like the perm or whatever. Or the second way that they could do this is the like question of identity that the policy coach was alluding to, like, okay, sure, you get to participate in the discussion, or either you don't get to participate in the discussion because you are not black, or you can participate, but you don't get to win off of this. You don't get like access to the same ballot conditions that we get by virtue of race, right? I think that compared to traditionally topicality arguments, a traditional topicality debate, in my opinion, it is much easier to win a theory debate once that you've set up this kind of scenario where you've given it a genuine shot. You've tried to actually genuinely, you must have actually tried to engage in this discussion, and then they sort of shoot you down. Then I think after that, I think it's so much easier to win off of theory than going into topicality from the get-go. I think it's a much stronger position, and I think it is one that they're likely to be less prepped on as well. So then there's kind of right two different scenarios, and both of them both lead to, I think, you having a higher chance of winning. Either they genuinely engage you and you have a discussion together, and I think you have a higher chance of winning if you're able to find some comparative way to win that discussion. We'll get to that in a second. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's the experiment of today's demo. Or they try to cut you off of this, and then you have a better theory argument in the topicality that they're also less prepped on. I think either way, you set yourself up for something that is A, unexpected, and B, possibly just a stronger position. But I am a PF coach. I'm not a policy coach. Fortunately, I think that the strategy actually works significantly better in PF because the traditional rules of the affirmative and the negative, they don't not only do they not historically exist in the same way as policy, but they're actually explicitly denied in the NSDA rules, which says there's no burden of proof or rejoinder for the different sides. They just sort of both answer. They just both take a different stance on the same question. And implicitly, I think by the structure, right, of the activity, like the neg can go first and there are no plans or counter plans. I think the corollary to that in K debate is it makes a little bit less sense to have like method and counter method if there's no plan or counter plan, that it's sort of like analogizing. The analogy would be more like there's a topic and then both teams take a stance on the topic, but they don't get to like invent their own plan or count. I don't know. It would be something different, something weird, something that doesn't have the traditional notion of burden of proof or burden of rejoinder. And that brings me to the second important piece of background for this demo round. I've watched about 30 different K rounds, give or take, in PF over the past 2 years. One of the main things that I've witnessed is that they're really weird, like specifically and structurally, right? Specifically, I remember watching a round last year online between Fairmont KT and I think Del Barton EP. Both of them read their own non-topical Ks in the constructive speeches, and then it kind of just got weird from there. Because unlike in policy, there's no established like way to do KVK debate. It became, I think, really puzzling. Like, who gets what offense? How do perms work in PF where like the sides seem symmetrical? Like if I perm you, can't you just perm me back? Like I don't know. I feel like the aff and neg dichotomy doesn't really work the same way. And so it's we're all just sort of saying things, and then there's a big question of ground. Like who gets what? Can you just say whatever you want and then like call that offense? Like I don't know. It's really weird. And so I've started experimenting with this. For example, my students Armand and Anuj from Plano West, they helped me put part of this theory to the test in TOC semifinals last year. Anya and Nura from East Ridge were reading a non-topical FemK. And I figured that if they get ground to identify whatever method they want, there's no good reason for them to get that and for us not to. There's no good way for them to answer what is essentially just like our own FemK in the second constructive that just has a different method, right? The only way they would be able to do this is by comparing their method against the methods that we get to just invent. And we're inventing them explicitly to be better than their methods. So that's going to be an uphill battle probably. Plus, it seems like it's just much harder to generate any IVI offense or anything that might have been their strategy against this because we are genuinely engaging in the productive discussion that they want to have in the debate. So it actually makes it, ironically, much easier for us to then run theory positions against them if they try to shut this down and shut off our ability to engage in this way and access the ballot in this way. In a way that sort of seems to foster incentives for more productive dialogue. And it worked. The round was a win. The round is up on YouTube. I encourage people to watch it. They went all in on this counter method, but it wasn't really taking it to the full extent, I think. It was a counter method. It wasn't really like a full-fledged K. I want to get even more creative. I want to see what would happen if we really take this to its logical extreme. Like, what if you just have two Ks that just agree on virtually everything, and they're just pitted against each other in the constructive speeches? So this round that you're watching here today in this video is my first real experiment in challenging how Ks work in PF. And so here's what happened. So in this demo debate, I debated Bashir. He is an Argument Institute coach. He was a TOC semifinalist and top speaker, and is now debating a K debate mostly in college policy. And this is what he sent me. This is a K about a little bit about anti-blackness on the Nosymber topic. So it is sort of topically in a really creative way related to encryption. So the whole point of the K is that it's like in both content and form, it is a blog, right? And it talks about how blogs have been an important kind of encrypted space for Black people to organize and survive from like surveillance, both literally and metaphorically. And so we can go through and read this. This is the first thing that I did. He sent this to me, and I just made sure that I read through everything. First thing that I did is I actually read through every single card without reading the tags and without only reading the highlighted text. I wanted to read every single word that was around it as well. And then I went back and read it all in the context of the tags. So I'll put this with his permission in the description of the YouTube video as well so that you can read it. It's a really creative K. So this is an article about how blogs have been very important for African American oral culture. They sort of reflect African American oral culture, and they are a center of exchange. And importantly, they occur in covert ways, right? They keep the discourse hidden from the dominant group. So this is the sort of topical link to encryption. The strategy here naturally is if I do go for the strategy of topicality, he'll say like, oh, we're actually even more topical, right? We might not be affirming the resolution in like the full literal meaning of the United States federal government or whatever. But we are embodying the topic that we're debating much more than you are actually. Which makes sense. I mean, this is literally sort of like a practice of encryption in some sense because it's through this blog that apparently historically has been used for covert kind of communication. So this is an article from Sadia Hartman that talks about this is kind of the theory of power card in the K, meaning this card is meant to reflect Bashir's ontological explanation for what blackness is and how anti-blackness operates. It's interesting because a lot of people who read Ks like this read Afro-pessimism. Hartman is definitely not a pessimistic scholar. Her thesis is that like there are always ways of generating hope. The wild thought and dangerous music of the enslaved expressed other visions of the possible and refused captivity as the only horizon, right? So it's like, yes, blackness has been synonymous with social death, but no, that's not something that is, the future is not foreclosed, right? That's not the only possibility. And the ways of doing minor resistance in the Black community is through imagining alternative visions of the possible, imagining that there is something else, imagining that freedom is possible and that there is social life within social death and that social death is something that can be in some alternative future overcome. So it's honestly more, to me, I think it's more even futurist than pessimistic. This evidence from McLaughlin 16 is a card that really attaches this to encryption. So it's also kind of provocative. It's like one of the thesis points of the blog is like we shouldn't reject whiteness. This whole like I just want to be white line. Obviously, this is more metaphorical than literal. It's like whiteness as status. It's about how resisting that kind of desire might actually be more violent. Um, and again, we get this McLaughlin argument that connects it really solidly to encryption. Um, and that's a good topic link. And then finally, we have this framing card here at the bottom. The role of the judge is to be a gardener, cultivate the environment around the black home. This card is great because this was written in 2025, evidently. It is a commentary on the NDT 2023 finals round, primarily. There's actually two parts of this, as you can see here. And they're both about black debate in competitive policy debate. And it's just a treasure trove of framework arguments that are really, really interesting. Like I found this quite fascinating. So the first thing that I did when I received this is I went and I read both parts back to front of the Reed Brinkley and Kelsey articles. I wanted to really understand them and really understand all the framing points they're getting at. So something that's interesting is that they're talking about the Wake versus Michigan round in which Wake read a K on the negative rather than a K affirmative. And so a lot of it is about the framework of how black debate can operate in terms of the burdens of the affirmative and negative, and how there might be a space for the negative to introduce questions that are apositional rather than oppositional to the affirmative. And so not necessarily satisfy the burden of rejoinder, kind of reject actually the burden of rejoinder, but find an affirmation through negation, right? Find a way to create a position around that's kind of a reckoning around blackness in debate that does not take a position intentionally, right? Like refuses to take a position on the contents of the affirmative. And so that was really interesting. I thought there was maybe some interesting stuff in there that I could also borrow for my own K. And so I ended up cutting some parts of it as well. The second thing that I did is, or I guess that was yeah, the second thing that I did, I went back and I watched the Wake versus Michigan round again. I really wanted to understand how it was being interpreted and how, especially concepts that they used, like the black chorus, were being used. The black chorus, especially, was really, I think, quite a powerful tool that was used in that debate. And so I really wanted to fully understand it and how it was being used. So after watching that debate again and reading Reed Brinkley and Kelsey, I went to Sadia Hartman's book, which is Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. And I found a copy of it. I read as much of it as I could. And specifically, I found every single part that referenced chorus or anything that was related to a chorus. And I kind of like took all of them and put them in a document to really put them all together and have a full, rich understanding of what the chorus is. And that's important because obviously, the concept of the black chorus used by Wake in that round comes from Sadia Hartman's book, and the concept of the black chorus, and Sadia Hartman is also cited in this K right here. Plus, the concept of the black chorus is a lot of the basis, naturally, for the Reed Brinkley and Kelsey article as well. So I had a lot of fun. I spent a few hours just like literally just reading that book. It was super informative. Highly recommend it. It's a good read, and it might help you understand some of this debate as well. The fourth thing that I did after that is I decided, okay, I've done a bunch of my reading. I should now start doing prep. So I went on Google Scholar and I wanted to find my own topic links, especially because I figured it would be pretty easy on the negative, especially. So I went on Google Scholar. I found about a dozen articles that were related to blackness and encryption. I actually found the McLaughlin article as well, sort of independently. I didn't even realize it until after I cut it. But I ended up using it as well, which happened to be a happy accident, I guess, a cool coincidence. And I found as many common threads and common themes as I could within them. And then fifth and finally, I wrote my K. So that's what I can show you now. So I was messing around a little bit. I made one version of the K that was encrypted, just for giggles. Doesn't really have any point, but I thought it was fun, kind of a performative thing. So I just when I sent the doc, I sent this one first, and then I sent the decrypted version. Honestly, maybe that could have been used against me, but I thought it was fun. So this is what I actually wrote. This is the K that I came up with. So I'll walk you through it and I'll walk you through the thought process of it. So the thought process is the first thing I knew that I needed to do is have some kind of a method for encryption. I noticed this was a little bit missing from the blog. Like, I guess the blog itself is the method of encryption, but I thought that was a bit of a loose tie. The article, Steel 17, just says that blogs have been used in covert ways in the past, but not that like a blog as a vessel inherently creates covertness or is a form of encryption. So I wanted to have a concrete form of encryption. I wanted to have a method that could actually encrypt something. Um, and so I thought about it and I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I could use the chorus itself. I just spent like hours and hours reading about it. And one of the main parts of Hartman's explanation of the chorus is that it is kind of a form of anonymity, right? It is a form of protection. It's a form of getting lost amongst the crowd of, and she specifically has a lot of really interesting passages that talk about how when this chorus is happening, people outside of it like can't they don't understand it, right? It's encrypted to them essentially metaphorically. And but the people inside the chorus, like they're all harmonizing multivocally with one voice. So then I realized like I can use this as the method, right? Then if the round does come down to comparing the different Ks or comparing methods or something, then it would be hopefully an easier way for me to win. Since we both agree encryption is important, right? I have a method for encryption. He doesn't really. And better yet, I could actually spin the chorus or like multivocality, right? This like getting lost in this crowd, singing together, harmonizing together as something attached to the way the debate plays out. As in, I could use the Reed, Brinkley, and Kelsey concept of apositionality and be like, hey, actually, like that's kind of like participating in the chorus. And in fact, they kind of say that too. And so maybe if I debate this apositionally instead of oppositionally, right? Then we can kind of harmonize. We can participate in the discussion that is the debate, the blog that is the debate together, and our voices can become kind of inseparable in a way that enables encryption and enables anonymity and renders our speech unintelligible to anyone who would decrypt it for bad reasons. And then I thought, like, okay, if I'm encrypting something and I'm already getting meta with it a little bit, right? Why stop at metaphorically encrypting blackness like the blog? Like, go do that too, right? Why not encrypt K debate itself as like a space, as a communication activity? I could then make that a pretty easy analogy, right? I could just, just as the state demands access to threatening communications to then shut them down, conservative politicians and school boards could like decrypt K debate to shut it down as a practice if we don't encrypt it effectively enough. So then that's what I put here at the top, right? I have this this thumbnail. I don't know if people have seen this. This is a pretty famous video, I guess infamous video at this point. This is insane, is the thing on the thumbnail. So this is a video from a conservative political perspective about, essentially criticizing K debate in PF that happened at the TOC a few years ago. And I pulled some quotes from the comment section as well. And then the point is like becomes kind of uniqueness for me, right? It's like if we do not effectively encrypt K debate, then it is like it will get out to people who don't like it, who have power to then come and shut it down. In fact, like this is something that I kind of believe. Like I've had conversations with people about this, like I, I don't know, like a lot of, conservative politicians have already taken charge, taken up arms against things like critical race theory. Some of the things we get in K debate seem to be even more radical perspectives that might be easy rallying points for like kind of culture war around it. And so maybe encryption is one way that we can prevent that kind of thing from happening. I recognize the irony of me like saying this all and spelling it out in a video, but I hope that this is like educational. No one snitches or anything. And yeah, so that's how I started the K. I thought that would be a sort of a provocative start to then explain why encryption is so important. And then the rest of it would become a practice and a method of doing that encryption that I embody through the rest of the K. Um, Cool. And then one great thing about this that I didn't actually end up using in this debate was that I realized I could also leverage like topicality or switch side debate if I wanted to. We are both equally attached to the topic. We're attached to encryption, but I think I'm clearly attached to the negative, and I don't think that Bashir's side is clearly attached to the affirmative, right? Like all of my arguments are about how we should not allow access to encrypted communications. And Bashir kind of agrees with that in his case. So if it came down to some weird tiebreaker, I guess I could be like, well, I'm actually negative and you're not. You're also negative. So I guess vote negative. And then finally, I also wanted to make my K a bit more intersectional. I wanted to focus it around blackness, obviously, but I also wanted to talk about, or at least mention, how encryption, literally and metaphorically, is important for women and gender minorities and queer people and neurodivergent people. This, I think, is important for me for a number of reasons, or useful for me in a number of reasons, besides just like I was interested in doing it. This fit the theme of multivocality really well, like having all these voices together voicing their grievances. It also gave me another way to win. If the debate comes down to like comparisons between the Ks, right? Well, I have all these groups or whatever. And I think it fits well into my experiment as like a provocative question about how Ks in PF work, right? Like literally, if the first team gets to talk about like the struggles of Black people for 4 minutes, what happens if the second team talks about the struggles of Black people and queer people? Like surely it doesn't come down to Black people are more important, or like every second of the speech that you spend talking about queer people is a second you could have spent talking about Black people. So it was like you should lose for talking about queer people. Like that seems ridiculous, right? Those arguments are ridiculous, and it should be very easy for me to beat them. So then the question becomes like, this is the experiment, right? Like, does the debate just break in this case? Like, that's exactly what I wanted to test. And most of all, I was going to pin the challenge of framework on Bashir. So I would wait him out. Like, you'll notice if I scroll through this case, so I've got like this is the sort of uniqueness, like this, there is a thread. And I'm intentionally making it like, we have to do this together. They don't think we could do this together, right? And I've got a card from myself about how debate is important. This card is literally the same article, just a different part that Bashir cites about how encryption is important for Black communications. And then I've got an interesting part of Toni Morrison's book that has encryption that creates layers of signification. So another reason encryption is good, it can like create new layer. This is kind of the mode in which it operates. It creates new layers of significance that both heighten the meaning of the debate that we produce and also allow certain layers to slip unnoticed through people who might try to shut them down. And then this card was about, I tagged it with a quote from Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. I thought, this is like the whole flow, right? Like throwing in different quotes in different places from different authors, getting some of that multivocality in there. And then this is about how encryption is important for women and gender minorities and queer people, survivors, etc. And then it talks about centering, which was useful because I could use that against the framework debate later. Then I've got a couple cards just about how like we need a certain kind of encryption that creates safe and autonomous spaces. And then this is fun. This is the here's the cipher, right? So if you want to decipher it, here's the whole way. This is the whole point. This is the method, which is a quote from Hartman that is about the chorus and how the chorus acts as this way of encrypting. Um, and then this is about how the state has mobilized, racialized mythological constructions of criminals. So the idea here is that the state like won't be able to hear this, and also that it leverages like decryption for racist purposes. It also says in debate, which is useful. And then we've got this article about Hush Harbor, about Black women's encrypted spaces for communications in academic institutions, again, quite topical in debate. And then finally, kind of like an additional like uh, I guess, side method, which is like I also am telling the state and the academy to decrypt themselves, which gets also a little bit meta. But I could use that as well as in like a method comparison debate if I wanted to. And then finally, I end with another quote from Hartman that is useful because this sort of ties into what I expect my position will eventually be about how like everyone is welcome in the chorus, right? There's no discrimination. And so this is starting to create a narrative to preempt some of the arguments I expect on framework about how I shouldn't be engaging in this discussion because I'm white or I don't have the same level like types of experiences or something. So I'm using some of the language of all of these authors to construct a whole narrative around how actually the method is that I engage in this space and that I am welcome in this space as well to engage. And that's how we create productive coalition building and conversations and multivocality to encrypt K debate spaces. Cool. So that's the K. What I was saying is that I think the best part of all of this is that I am not making an argument about why this is better than his K, right? There's nothing at all here about that. Like and I'm intentionally refusing to do that. I'm saying like I am joining you, right, in this conversation. I am adding to your discussion. And so instead, what I'm doing is I'm kind of waiting him out, right? I'm flipping the traditional K script because usually when the first speech reads the K, then they expect the next speech will give all these reasons why it shouldn't get the ballot, right? And then those are easy to like generate new offense off of or say like that's stupid, right? And now I'm doing the opposite. I'm forcing him to be the one who says I can't win off of my K. So by refusing to explain how the judge should evaluate between the Ks, I'm forcing Bashir to tell the judge how to write their ballot, which I think puts him in a very awkward position that he's not necessarily really expecting. He has to be the one to say things like, my discourse doesn't deserve access to the ballot, but his does. Or that the judge should compare between like the oppressed status of each group that we're discussing, or that the judge should vote for him because of the color of his skin. Like these things, I think, are all, in my opinion, uncomfortable positions to make and require a lot of delicacy and are, I think, pretty easy to beat relative to a lot of the other positions I might have had to beat if I was going for just traditional topicality. If I can assert a positionality, right, using Reed Brinkley, his own framing card, then it's a much easier position, and I can catch him making claims about how K debate should operate that are very counterintuitive and generate offense off of, if I want to do that. Plus, all of his authors actually do agree with me, right? I am using a lot of his authors intentionally. They agree not only with my method of like this multivocality and encryption, but the fulfillment of my apositional role in the debate as well, instead of having a burden of rejoinder. So I wouldn't contest his thesis. I would build the discussion off of it. And it would be his choice to shoot down my contribution to the discussion. And then I could just be there like, what? I thought we're doing this together. I thought we're participating in a discussion together. Like you gave your piece, I gave my piece. Now you're saying like, I can't have mine. Like I was just trying to have a discussion with you. And then that would thereby break multivocality, actually, because otherwise we'd be sort of building off of this together as a chorus, and that would be decrypting K debate. So there's tons of very nice, I think, strategic paths that arise out of this K as long as I can execute. So let's see if I can. Without further ado, here is the round. Yeah, cool.
Welcome to the blog. We resist this movement that operates covertly on a register that evades capture. This 1AC is a blog in both content and form. It is a mode of resistance that draws on the historical cultural exchange central to the Black community to engage in counter public steel. 17. African American internet contains a challenge of present systems mimic African American oral culture in both content and form and approaching Black digital practice without a deficit lens. Attention shifts to the possibilities for Black users of digital technology and articulating resistance, assuming that an overt political agenda is a requirement for politically meaningful discourse runs counter to our knowledge of how African American political communication has historically occurred in covert ways that keep this discourse hidden for the dominant group. Blogging is a platform most closely replicates oral culture exchange central to the Black community. Black Americans capitalize on the skill set to use their platform in the creation of alternate publics that use covert methods to interrogate issues critical to resistance. Bloggers to navigate the bounds of their medium to do important political and cultural work. Past its position blogs as effectual counter publics and the blog is an act of minor resistance hidden away from the master that seeks to find social life in the context of social death and cultivate an imagination of a world in the afterlife of slavery. Hartman 22. The enslaved challenger refused, deified, and resisted the condition of enslavement and its ordering and negation of life. This dimension has received less attention. These everyday practices were attempts to liberate from the status of commodity into a firm existence, not shadows, not properties, not much the wild thought of the enslaved opposite framework of property and commodity, contested the idea that they were less than human, nurtured acts of retribution in the context of social death every day. Practice cultivated imagination, otherwise and elsewhere. Cartographies of the fantastic, utterly antagonistic of slavery. The enslaved refused to accept the order of values that had transformed them into units of currency. Secret meetings of freedom schools hid away in the loopholes of retreat and hush harbors gathered at the rivings of their dwellings in the swamp and enabled them to conceive of other ways of existing and sustain belief in the inevitability of slavery's demise. Such practice reshaped the contours of the day-to-day and expansive register of minor gestures undoing slavery by small acts of stealth and destruction, sacred transport and faith made it possible to survive the unbearable while never acceding to it. And in this week's blog, my wish is to become white. Who wouldn't want to be white? You've got the world. Are you a nice house? Not the projects. Owning companies, not being owned by companies. Having money, not problems. Who would not want to be white? McLaughlin 16. How does one become white? The wish that underlines I just want to be white is nonetheless powerful and real. Whites want to become whiter, but so too do people of color. Well, who doesn't want to be beautiful, rich, and white? Who doesn't want to escape the darkness of false poverty and exclusion? I want to be white, but obviously I never will be if not. If that means having the ability to influence spaces rather than be a target. And but why blog? But why not just read the same argument we've been reading for years? Well, it's all a form of Black Ops. Black Ops is an analytic that does not reject whiteness, but rather embraces it. It is a form of black data that operates in secrecy, fugitivity, and evasion of Black Ops and Chris movements from the state without a hope of a coherent output. 3 examples like Persia's song Google Ask. We can see glimpses of another world that's possible. Johnson and McLaughlin 16. Black data books counter knowledge. This is stealthy forms of resistance. Black Ops McLaughlin applies the materials of Black career analytic to the deep web algorithms, databases, and protocols that make it the vast majority of the internet, but are usually hidden from view. McLaughlin links into the deep web to the ways Black bodies are understood as statistical objects rather than as ontologically material. The desire to become white is a shadow breath. The most common reaction to such a wish is denied, but the urge to challenge the logic of whiteness and self itself. Reproduce another set of answers and instead embrace forms of darkness which identity is obscure. There are no coherent rational subjects here, just fierce refusals. These refusals are a kind of Black Ops, a form of black data that consists of the hope of a coherent or a positive output. People of color might tactically redeploy Black Ops as a technique of masking secrecy or evasion. Black Ops imagines a world in which our identities and movements are our own, opaque to securitized gazes. Persia embraces darkness. Her face more sheer forms. I want to be white like you. Twitter me, Facebook me, gentrify my love. Her cruise. Transformation parodies whiteness. Her Black as both a refusal and a rearticulation of the stuck frustrations. Black is encrypting. And the role of the judge is to be a gardener and cultivate the environment around the Black home. Black Ops operates through rhetorical practices like the one he sees framing of blogs as a refusal to accept capture and generate experiments of fugitivity that collectively orient us towards freedom. Read Brinkley and Kelsey 25. Black fugitivity and marriage were refusals of captivity. Fugitivity highlights the tension between the acts of escape and create factors of refusal that undermine the category of the dominant. These are oriented oppositional to the side of liberal humanism, racial dialectic, where fugitive blackness neither desires mastery nor fatally accepts slavery. But this articulates the correspondence between the two categories. Fugitivity are black from speculative perspectives, building alternatives to racial colonial progress. Black insurgent arguments, names, and inventive figure rhetorical practice are refusal animated by an abolitionist imperative to bring about the end of the world as we know it that precedes, anticipates, and exceeds racial liberalism and regulative discourses. Black insurgent arguments expose racial capitalism, racial capitalism, liberalism, parasitic investment in blackness, and second, by facilitating a critical capacity for collective insurgency, black insurgent arguments invite you to the cacophonous desire, harm, and recovery the insurgency minor figures who imagine other ways to live and never fail to consider how the world might be otherwise. While there's no guarantee that one will join the chorus, so to speak, the chorus demonstrates that even risks and failures of style are arguments in themselves.
This is insane. These kids are not debating, they're ranting. Senseless activists in training. Whoever's got more oppression wins, right? How are parents okay with schools pouring their tuition into this slop? They don't believe that this could possibly be a productive conversation. No, that's not quite it. They know it can be a productive conversation. That's why they're so scared. Scared that the dialectic process of the debate could become something greater than the sum of its parts, that it could produce an aesthetic, a resistance, a revolution, not from the monologue, but from multivocal harmonization. Deep down, they know that those inside that circle will listen for the love and disappointment, the longing and the outrage that fueled this collective utterance. If they ever get their hands on this beautiful project, they'll call it criminal, and that will be the end of it. Don't let this be the end of it. Haze 24, debate is a unique space in which structure and creative freedom develops theories of mind and begets senses of agency. I'm never providing you access to my encrypted communications. McLaughlin 16. Learning how to make oneself opaque is a necessity in political tactic. States digitally log our every interaction. States describe encrypted communications as threats. How do we resist such demands? The black box provides a model for the black bloc to survive. To resist the hegemony of the transparent, we need to embrace techniques of becoming dark, to assert our agency without being apprehended. A mask anonymizes while also representing the shared collectivity. Masks operate as a part of a new politics of opacity, of a form of black data that can offer a layer of protection rather than hide a real essence. It's like an onion. Lankinen 23. And Toni Morrison's beloved 124 was spiteful, directs audience attention to the novel's central encryption system. 124 is a cipher through which Morrison's reader must pass through to unlock layered significations. By following these figures, the reader observes two distinct narratives. One conveys the horrors of American slavery, the other, written into re-signified signs, records the stories of the heroes, heroines, and holy mothers within the black community. Morrison reorients the locus of power
power over the signification of English signs. We know what, we know why, we know when, we know who. Walking down 7th Avenue, Mabel delighted in getting lost in the crowd and being carried away by the rush of black, brown, and tan bodies and being one among the chorus. McNamee 25. Encryption is a vessel for power and agency protecting autonomy, dignity, and safety for marginalized communities. Governments would weaken encryption for everyone, especially for those already subject to historical patterns of state overreach. Stakes are high. 1 in 5 homicide victims in the U.S. have been killed by an intimate partner. Survivors rely on encrypted messaging for contact support, coordinating escape, or documenting their experiences. People seeking reproductive care need encryption to protect information that could implicate them. Lattice Fisher was charged with second-degree murder after a stillbirth based on her phone data. The needs of women and gender minorities need to be centered. It is vital to adopt a framework grounded in equity. Do we know how? West 21. Power shapes the conditions for surveillance. Race and racism, gender and misogyny affect not only who is most impacted by surveillance, but also how encryption technologies were designed. We need a new imaginary for encryption that draws on queer, black, and feminist thought by centering the need to create safe and autonomous spaces for collective survival. Do you catch my drift? Rosenblum 25. This work calls for abolition cryptography, cryptographic theories, and practices which dismantle harmful systems and replace them with systems that sustain human lives and livelihoods. Here is the cipher. You get it right. No, not you. Neither the state nor the academy know how to dance. Hartman 19. The chorus was transformed from a line of separate dancers into a shared body, finding a common rhythm. And this body moved as one, erasing the borders of the bounded self, feeling and moving in concert, and communicating with the audience through the cadence of voices, gestures, variations of movement, and the rhythm of clap and step. The state slithers and permeates, flood it with meanings that it can discern. All it can discern are hurricanes of screams, cyclones of rage, tornadoes of squeals. Writer 22, crypto advocates ignore questions of race. State actors mobilize racial mythological constructions of criminals in negotiating how to regulate encryption. It is important to center the racist carceral culture of the U.S. in seemingly disconnected areas such as debate. I am the academy and I demand that you provide access to your communications. If you've committed no crime, you've got nothing to hide. Kynard 10. Hush Harbor, a site where black women build virtual spaces for counter stories. These communities historically allowed participants to share and create knowledge in hostile environments which involve an academic institution. Decrypt yourself, state. Decrypt yourself, academy. Who 17. In ways that are largely invisible, the cyber surveillance state constructs and targets digital data deemed suspicious. Violations will be difficult to identify and challenge. If you are able to bear the burden of what they have to bring, then there is a place for you inside the circle. Negate. I'm good for cross.
What is the chorus?
The chorus is defined by Saidiya Hartman in a lot of different ways. It's used as sort of a metaphorical instantiation where any one person can fill in as another person because they're all in this multivocal chorus together. I have a lot of different paragraphs I've cut from Hartman that describe it in very different ways. The unifying factor of it is that it is a chorus of voices who are together
Cool. You can
expressing
have
their
one.
concerns. Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Why is it good to examine the African American blogosphere as a counterpublic?
Our argument behind the counterpublic and specifically the ways that the judge is supposed to evaluate things such as black blogging is that there is always going to be a form of social death, a form of anti-blackness that permeates and replicates itself through the world. It is important to have your own narrative, your own public, so to speak, to be able to coalition build with other black people, to be able to develop strategies, to be able to challenge the oppressing group. Can I have a
Okay.
question?
Yeah.
How does the negative rejoin the affirmative?
How does the affirmative rejoin the negative?
How does the negative rejoin the affirmative?
Seems like we're going in circles. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Does black debate have a rule book?
Define rule book.
I'll define it the same way your author does.
Okay, before we get into that, I just want to be really clear. What is black debate?
It's what is described by Reed Brinkley that is emerging from the tradition of debate that is specifically instantiated in that article in Wake's debate against Michigan.
What you just told me is it's what Reed Brinkley says it is. What does Reed Brinkley say it is?
I just
What
told you.
is black debate?
I mean, like, if it's something that's different from what your author says, I'd love you to describe that as well.
I would like you to put it in your own words when I ask you what is black debate.
Um, in my own words, I would say it's a
Mhm.
tradition, um, mainly in policy debate, but probably even extending beyond the start of competitive debate of black debaters talking like specifically black debate as a sort of a term of art is about like centering blackness
What
in
constitutes
competitive
a
discussion.
black debater?
A black debater is someone who engages in black debate. Can I ask you a question?
What is black debate?
I'll ask you a question now because I think I've answered like three. Is Hartman, and when you cite Hartman in your case, talking about blogs? Your tag is like about
Hartman
blogs.
Hartman argues that there is potential for social life within social death. The
Yeah,
affirmative theorization is that the way that social life can replicate itself is through things like the blog. Does Hartman specifically say the blog is an example of this? No, but Hartman's theorization definitely complements what the affirmative thinks is good.
awesome. Thanks.
Quick flex. Any independent reasons to negate any tricks or spikes in the negative?
I
Anything
would
that will
never,
automatically lose me the debate if I
I
concede
would
it.
never ever do that to you.
Awesome. All right. It will be, I guess, um, top level overview that you should flow on the affirmative, and then just going down the negative. There is not a world where you conclude that the negative position is good and competes because their deployment of encryption in the debate is a concession of a permutation. Their authors agree that Black Ops is a good form of resistance because their authors are the exact authors that the affirmative cites. The Hartman theory of power is dropped. Their reading of Hartman's theorization of the course concedes that there are possibilities for social life within social death, which ends the debate when paired with the DSRB and Kelsey evidence at the bottom. We will make this very clear. The DSRB and Kelsey evidence solves the affirmative because they've dropped that blogging is a desirable form of Black insurgency, which is a key form of resistance. This is genuinely round ending because they've dropped that even if the movement fails, even attempts at insurgency are a form of arguments within themselves, which means you should pull the trigger on the risk of the affirmative being good. I will be very clear when DSRB and Kelsey talk about things like fugitivity that is unique to Black people. When we talk about things like insurgency, the way that these things operate are not things that Mac can access. Which is why when the car talks about things like fugitivity and maroonage, they're all forms of Black resistance, and the negative attempts at accessing them is a particularly gross form of privilege that is ivory tower based. I have no fucking clue what Mac is practicing, but it definitely is not fugitivity. When they say things in the negative position, like for example, the debate can be a productive conversation, they cannot understand how their conversations that they desire require people to be in conversation with each other between multiple different perspectives without understanding how these people cannot begin to put their perspectives out there. And they need to find people along their lines to coalition build with. That is what the entire 1AC is about. They've conceded everything we say about the counterpublic and why that is important. The whole point of their advocacy being encrypted is them proving that the affirmative is good. Every single warrant that they give you about why encryption is good and why it is good to encrypt communication in the negative position is exactly what the affirmative is saying is good. They've just not rejoinded the affirmative. They're going to get up and tell you that we have not rejoinded the negative, but our argument is the affirmative's win condition is to simply prove that the affirmative is good. There is no way that they can argue that the affirmative is not good because we have not rejoinded the negative. Additionally, there is a concession of the role of the judge, which makes this debate game over because the role of the judge is to cultivate the environment around the Black home. There is no way or explanation that Mac has given as to how he accesses that role of the judge. However, they've conceded everything we see about insurgency being good and insurgency being important within the debate space specifically. That was the DSRB and Kelsey evidence at the bottom, which means that the affirmative is uniquely good for setting and cultivating the energy around the Black home. Next, everything they say about encryption being a vessel for power and agency, being able to protect autonomy, dignity, and safety for marginalized communities is not in the context of Blackness. You should not allow them to have that from their McNamee evidence. Everything that they say is not in the context of Blackness. I cannot stress that enough. The fact that they think that there are possibilities for things like power and agency and autonomy, dignity, and safety for Black people is exactly what Hartman critiques and double turns. That is the exact conditional humanism argument that Hartman makes in scenes of subjection. When they make the argument about burden of individuality, there is no such thing as autonomy, dignity, and safety for the Black body. There is no way that the negative can argue that their position is good because all they've done is literally just take the affirmative and then make it anti-Black. There is no explanation at all as to how they link into the affirmative or what they have done to create a sufficient win condition for them. Next. There is no way for the academy to decrypt itself. There's no way for the state to decrypt itself. Our argument is not that it is good for those things to happen because it is impossible for the state to decrypt itself. Their evidence is also not in the context of blackness, which means that it can never begin to understand the unique socially dead position of black people. When they say things like, for example, the cyber surveillance state constructs and targets digital data deemed suspicious, they cannot understand how any form of black data is deemed suspicious always, and there's no form of black data that cannot operate in covert resistance that is hidden from the state. That is the whole point of the affirmative. The whole point is that we function on a register that the state cannot access. That is why you're going to be affirming. There's no hope for the state to decrypt itself. The concession of the theory of power makes that very clear because the black body is always put into a position of being socially dead. However, the affirmative opens the door for possibilities of social life.
I am good to go. It's just going to be down the speech that you just heard. Cool. Okay. Is everyone ready? Cool. They're the ones that concede the perm. This is PF. Since when does the negative have a burden of rejoinder? What was your plan if the neg spoke first? Just because you want a coin flip, it got to go first. Doesn't mean that you have the only independent advocacy in the debate and everything just centers around your monologue. In PF, the case speech is independent. It is a speech that is prepared before the debate without regard for what the other side reads. You get your contribution to this discussion, and I also get mine. 2, your own author, by the way, Reed Brinkley, says that this is terrible even in policy debate. The negative is a position, not oppositional. There is no rule book in black debate. Next, you make the argument that fugitivity is unique to black people. I'm going to make 3 responses to this. 1, again, your own author, Reed Brinkley, the one that you chose to read as the framing card to frame this debate, says this. Black debate does not enforce content or style. It does not have a list of eligibility criteria for entry. There's no purity test. It is rather a term that signals an apositional rather than oppositional movement of improvisation, a loose solidarity of those committed to a horizon beyond the sovereign impositions of racial liberalism. It has many blueprints, but no definitive handbook and certainly no rule book. Second response to this, your own thesis of your K is that we should not reject whiteness, but rather embrace forms of darkness in which identity is, quote, rendered opaque without a coherent, rational, self-knowing subject. That requires a step away from policing discourse based on racial identity. 3, so what? Are you just arguing that I should just not engage you at all in discourse? Should I not talk about racial things? I believe that it is important for white people to also talk about issues of racial justice and civil rights. I used to think that I should never take part in these conversations because I didn't share the same kind of violence in my personal life. But then I learned from other people. For example, in my hometown, Orange County Justice United, they asked me, what kind of personal stake do you have in justice? What kind of personal stake do you have in racial equality in your communities? You also have a stake. You also have the capacity to empathize, the capacity to stand up and join these voices, the capacity to participate in multi-vocality, to actually move this movement forward. That's what coalition building means. It can't only be with one group of people. The next argument that Bashir makes is that the ask win condition is that the affirmative is good. The neg win condition is that the negative is good. The next argument is about the role of the judge as a gardener to center blackness. 1, what does this mean? Why does the judge have to vote for you? 2, I am doing this. All of my evidence talks about blackness and its cultivation. 3, my evidence also says center women and gender minorities, center queerness, center racial carceral history, center safe and autonomous spaces for collective survival. Multiple things can and need to occupy the center at once. Multiple things need to be gardened. That's what it means to have intersectionality. It's all in the center of that circle, intersecting arms, dancing, listening for the love and the disappointment, the longing and the outrage that has fueled this collective utterance. The next argument that is made is that it's not in context of blackness, so don't let them have it. This is in the context of my McNamee card. Yeah, it's true. I mean, some of it is in the context of blackness, but a lot of it is in the context of women or gender minorities, which their authors aren't in the context. Like, are you saying that this isn't worth talking about? I think part of the case should also be about this, right? This is part of the discussion. This is what it means to have intersectionality. Then they say that the fact that they think dignity is possible is bad. We never said that there's no social death. You might be right. We read a lot, very similar argument about how encryption is important for things like daring to hope for a brighter future, and preventing more material harms to black people beyond the dignity that has been stripped away from them. The next argument they read is that like I've copied their authors. One, you don't get exclusive rights over someone else's exclusive work. Two, if I had won the coin flip and went first, I would have said you're copying mine. And three, at least I interpreted the authors correctly. A quote from the card that they read, quote, I argue that examining the African American blogosphere as a counterpublic erases the important work of enclave communities and satellite publics. Hold them to the tag. Clearly, they're misreading their own evidence. They say that the state can't decrypt itself. Why? It seems possible to me. I demand it. We should imagine that something that seems possible is possible. That's also the point of all of their authors. And they say that the whole point is that they're deemed suspicious already. Exactly. That's what my evidence says, which is why we need encryption. We present a method for that encryption.
Good for Crossfire.
Yeah.
Okay. So I flowed it and I listened. I'm not entirely sure what the argument here is supposed to be. You cite my author. I argue that examining that African American blogging as a form of cultural exchange, whatever, like that line right there. What does that do for you? What does that prove? How does that prove the affirmative is bad or any of the arguments that I've made are wrong?
Which line?
The one that you cited, I argue that examining the African American blogging as a
Oh,
platform
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
replicates. Yeah.
So in the tag of your case in Crossfire and again in rebuttal, you said that it's
Counterpublic. Yep.
important to build counterpublics, but the
Yep.
author you use in your blog to defend this says, quote, I argue that examining the African American blogosphere as a counterpublic erases the important work of enclave communities and satellite publics. So your author argues the thesis
Are
they're
you
offering.
are you talking about the same author that says that past studies position blogs as an
Yes,
effective
yes,
counterpublic for
exactly.
marginalized
So
communities?
to be clear, your author says the past studies positioned it as a counterpublic. That's
Hmm.
bad. We shouldn't do that.
Okay. You're wrong, but it's okay. You can have a
I
question.
mean, I guess the judge can read the evidence. I've read a quote from
Yeah,
it.
go ahead.
Yeah, can I ask you a question? Sure. So, what the heck is the role of the negative in this debate, and what author do you read that supports it?
We would argue that KVK debate is good. I would not
Yeah,
call this round a
absolutely.
KVK debate because it is not a K
Wait, what?
versus another K. You have just read the same K back to me. Essentially,
That's not true at all. Wait,
that
this is
will be a
totally
core
a K
part of the
debate.
summary that you'll see because I think that the permutation
Okay.
debate is kind of
I look
mishandled.
forward to seeing that new
Yeah,
argument, but
but
it seems like
my
I'm contributing just as much
essentially
story to this conversation.
essentially to answer your initial question, just so we don't go back and forth here, the role of the negative is to provide a different or better resistance strategy that cultivates the environment around the black hole. Can I have a
All right.
question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. What is a maroon?
A maroon? Where did I
Yes.
cite maroons?
You did not, but it is very important in the context of the debate because it is in the DSRB evidence that you have used as a warrant as to why you get to engage in the affirmative method.
Could you pull a line for that? Because then maybe we can interpret it together.
As to like what the evidence says about it.
Yeah, like, or maybe I can
Yeah.
control F.
Literally the first thing, black fugitivity and marronage. Marronage is the act of being a maroon. What does it mean to engage in marronage slash be a maroon?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm sure, like, let's see, I can
Um,
Google
m-
it.
a maroon is a runaway slave.
Yeah, okay, the act of escaping slavery. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So marronage being the act of escaping slavery, how do you get to engage in marronage?
I certainly don't. 100% I agree with that. But
Mhm.
your evidence says that in the context of competitive debate, it is important that it is a space that does not have a purity test on who engages, whether that be racial, whether that be any kind of identity, which also aligns with the thesis of your K.
Okay, let's cross. Quick flex. Mac, in your speech, when I said that you don't get to be a part of the affirmative, slash you don't get to engage in the method of the affirmative, you said that we say that we should um embrace whiteness. Is the
No,
negative. Sorry,
wait,
go ahead.
in what part?
When I said you don't get to access the affirmative method, you said three things. One, the thing about DSRB saying this is bad for black debate. Two, I literally say we should embrace whiteness. Three, you learn from your hometown that you also have a stake and capacity to empathize, etc.
You're asking about the second one because it's a bit more nuanced than just embrace whiteness. That's not really the argument.
But you're saying that we should not police discourse because of political identity. I think that that's kind of like the or because of like your identity, i.e., for example. Right.
Sort of. The specific argument comes from the line of your card that says that we need an alternative view of racial identity as being obscured, as being nuanced, as complicated. and not being a dichotomy.
Right. But just to clarify, when we talk about things like whiteness, does the negative have a position or relation to whiteness?
I'm white. Like, is that what you want me to say?
Not specifically, but
Okay, I haven't made an
it'll
argument that is a position related to whiteness in the rebuttal, if that's your question.
okay. It is gonna be essentially the AF. Um, it's a little weird for me to give a roadmap because I do kind of believe that the neg is also the AF. But it's going to just I'll signpost, I guess. It'll be the AF. All right. Everyone good? Blogging is an act of covert minor resistance that exposes the possibility for social life within social death. The one he sees wish of becoming white is an insurgent instantiation of the blog that does not reject whiteness, but rather embraces the radical potential of blackness. This mode of insurgency is an encrypted refusal of anti-blackness. Will win the one he sees blog is good for is a sufficient win condition for you to vote affirmative because the role of the judge frames the debate as it's impossible to cultivate the environment around the black home without modes of covert resistance. The concession of the role of the judge means that Mac will never win this debate on a permutation argument because all he has done is take the affirmative and remove its radical potential by removing its fugitivity. It is literally ridiculous to even call this a KVK debate because in negative had just read the affirmative back to me. They say there's no burden of rejoinder. I don't recall making that argument. I've never said you must rejoin the affirmative, but your strategy is literally not different. It is not that it negates the affirmative, but it is literally not even apositional. It is the same exact fucking position. You should hold the line. They've dropped the even risk and failure of styles and performance or arguments in and of themselves. Again, that was a DSRB evidence which functionally ends this debate because it is the only form of competition between both sides. Both sides read encrypted arguments and literally cite the same authors. The only difference is that one of them is insurgent and the other isn't. Mac can never access things like maroonage because to be a maroon requires you to be a slave. First, they say black debate does not have a list of qualifications. One, I'll make a new homogenization decide. You've conflated my original argument about fugitivity and marinage to be engaging in black debate, which are two different structures. You can engage in black debate, however, you do not get to access the specific method of the affirmative. To engage in black debate all you want, but you not and will not masquerade marinage and fugitivity, which are unique to the affirmative. They say that we say that we should embrace whiteness. One, our argument is in the context of accepting the desire to become white within ourselves, not letting white people to like join coalition building, but also whiteness is distinct from white people. Two, our argument is not about policing discourse, hence why you didn't pick up on the fact that I intentionally conceded everything you say at the top about debate being potentially good. You're entitled to your own discourse, but our critique was of your attempt at accessing it as a site of resistance, which is specifically fugitivity. Group the things about Mac learning from his hometown and his McNamee evidence being intersectional that does not grapple with our Hartman theory of power that black people specifically are put in a unique state of being socially dead. Obviously, it's important to talk about other shit as well, but there's no way that you can place it in the center in the same level as blackness because being black is ontologically different from what it means to be to be on the oppressed based on your gender or so on and so forth. The last thing I need on the AFLO is the blog itself. Extend the wish of wanting to become white. Drop that the wish has a radical potential to embrace forms of whiteness. The next thing or the next argument that they make is what does it mean for the role of the judge to cultivate the environment around the black home? We think that this is incredibly clear. The black home or black homemaking is things that exist in the Hartman evidence that they've conceded, things like freedom schools, and there are certain pulses of black social life within social death which have been conceded. And the role of the judge is to embrace and endorse that form of scholarship, which is important. We have not argued that we get exclusive authorship to our authors. We're just saying that your authors agree because they're also our authors. Next. They say that examining African American blogging as a counter public is bad. No, that is not what our Steele evidence says. Our Steele evidence is specific about how African American people have continued to use the internet to challenge structures based on oppressors and use that as a way to create their own form of coalition building, which is uniquely good. But even if you buy the response, the Hartman theory of power textures it and means that a counter public is good because it means that white people can never access the same method.
Okay. Is everyone ready? I can resist as well. It is not the same position. Mine is also performative in the same way that yours is. Mine is also insurgent. I'm not a maroon. I never said I access the method of the affirmative, although I think it's whack to exclude it for the same reasons I gave earlier. If the negative is good, vote negative. Debate is a hideaway, an important space for neurodivergent people, black resistance, women, gender minorities, queer movers and shakers to develop ethical orientations, challenge power structures, hone their activism, and escape from the violence of the world into the chorus for even just a weekend. It's a microcosm of the world in which encryption is a matter of life or death for survivors, people seeking reproductive care, black ops, and all marginalized communities who are subjected to structural abuse. We've seen what happens when these communities become decrypted and slip out. Power relations reassert themselves. Programs for debate shut down. Spaces for resistance are inverted. Only through encryption do critical debates stand a chance that the best method of encryption is through becoming a voice in the chorus, engaging in harmonization multivocally and apositionally, not KVK debate. In the words of Hartman, erasing the borders of the bounded self and the borders between Aff and Neg. Resistance happens together. We perform the blog of the round together, encrypting it and allowing it to become a creative project greater than the sum of its parts. In the words of Reed Brinkley, when the state demands access to encryption, we refuse, we negate. The first way that you can vote for me, if it's a coin flip, I could have been first as well. What the fuck would you have done? Just because you were first in the debate doesn't mean that your position is the only one that we talk about. To win, you must prove that the role of the negatives to rejoin the affirmative. Did you have any warrant in this debate, in the case or the rebuttal or in the summary for that matter, why that should be the case? No, there was no warrant. It is certainly not a default in PF when case and rebuttal fulfill important independent roles and there are no burdens of proof or rejoinder. There's two reasons to prefer this. One, your own framing evidence that you chose to read rejects the negative's burden of rejoinder. It literally says that supports racial liberal dialectic of normative debate, even in policy. And second, our entire K is a reason that this burden is not true. We need to engage in multivocality. We have offense that is conceited about why that is the best way to encrypt, which is the best method that we both agree is important for encryption. Second way to vote for me, under your role as the judge, why is your blog better than mine? Our authors do agree, but I read them correctly instead of misreading them. You're wrong on your blog. You instrumentalize your author. You say we need counterpublics. Your author says we should not examine the counterpublics. We should talk about the enclaves instead. You say that it does improve coalition building. No, it says that enclaves improve coalition building. It's rejecting those other authors that say this. And Hartman doesn't talk about counterpublics at all, so that analysis is ridiculous. But also, we have a more coherent method of encryption. There's no method of encryption ever in the 1IC or the Aff in the round. We present one. We enact one in this debate. Do not vote on any argument that is based on the skin color of the debaters in the round. One, their own framing evidence rejects this. Two, Hartman rejects this. It says the chorus is open. Three, your own McGlotton evidence in your blog, the thesis of your blog, rejects this concept of identity. You can engage in black debate. You just have to lose for it. You just don't get our method. It's whack. That means that there's no co-resistance. There's no genuine engagement. There's no centering of blackness. We can't win for that. That means that your model of K debate actively shuts down the only way that we can encrypt it, the only way that we can support black ops.
Good for Cross.
Good for Cross.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm a pretty good flow. The homogenization DA was conceded. How are you going to remedy that?
The homogenization DA was about not maroon. I think I'm pretty good at flowing as well, and I think I clarified around that.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Okay, so which part of this was it? Because maybe I named it.
It is that the affirmative is fugitivity, yes. However, you've conflated that to be just engaging in black debate.
No. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. The speech that I just gave said that that's not a conflation that I make. I'm talking about black debate, which is true. It's not fugitivity. I do not engage in the kind of the Mariner fugitivity that you talk about. That's true. I'm not conflating the two.
My argument though is in the first rebuttal, I said you don't get to access fugitivity. You get up in second rebuttal and you say your authors say it is good for us to engage in black debate. As if that is supposed to be responsive. So right. it is either you've homogenized me or you just did not respond to the fact that you do not get to access fugitivity.
So, certainly,
pick your poison.
It is the second one. It is the second one. I'm not accessing fugitivity. Like I'm not a marooner.
So you would rather lose on the affirmative being good rather than lose on the homogenization.
I've given plenty of arguments why that's not a reason that I lose, just because you have the racial capacity to act in this fugitivity way, and I don't.
That's not what the Aff is, but go ahead, take a question.
Okay, sure. Cool. So you say that the role of judge is conceded, that we need to be a gardener. Why is the ontological differences between blackness and things like survivors of intimate partner violence. Why is that a reason why those other things should not also be centered along with blackness?
I'm pretty sure that you know kind of how Hartman theorizes social death. I don't want to spend like basically all of cross explaining it, but
Yeah, I'm good with that.
essentially the idea of that and the and our or the affirmative theorization of social death means that to be black is to be put in a unique position of subjugation, which is distinct from what it means to face gendered
Yeah,
violence, trans violence, so on and
yeah.
so forth.
I agree with all of this.
Which means that because of that different ontological capacity and because of the unique way that that violence is replicated, it is impossible to put it at the same level as things like, for example, like gendered violence, which actually, by the way, Hartman would call a ruse of analogy.
Wait, I think this is a vast misunderstanding of what I'm saying. I'm saying that they can all occupy the center. That doesn't mean that they all occupy the same
And
level in
that
the center.
that
That
that's
they're the same
exactly what
thing.
the ruse that's exactly what the ruse of analogy is, right? For example, to say that they can all occupy the same area, i.e., they can all fit under the same
The
white
area is the
idea of
discussion.
this area
Like
it like I
it's
think
a
Matt,
discussion.
to give you your flowers, you were very persuasive in this part of the debate. I think you're wrong about how Hartman's theory
Wait,
of
so
power
to
functions.
be clear, you think we can't talk about women and black people at the same time? That's ridiculous.
That's not what I said, but that is
That's what it
exactly
means to
what Hartman
center both in the discussion.
no, you simply cannot center both in the same discussion.
That's what
That is
it
the whole point of the
means.
affirmative. You cannot center both in the same discussion. Yes, obviously it is important to
That's
talk
like the
about
whole
women.
point of intersectionality.
Yeah, but we're saying intersectionality is bad. Let's cross. Lex, Mac, you said don't vote on arguments about skin color. When did I make an argument that I should win the debate based off my skin color?
That's not what I said. I said don't vote for arguments that imply that one debater can access a method or a win condition in the debate based on the color of their skin. You
Okay.
never said it
I
explicitly.
want to focus on the word method really quickly. Are you saying that you should be able to access fugitivity? Or that the
No.
judge should not vote on fugitivity because I am black and you are not?
My argument is that any argument in the round that depends on, that is a win condition that depends on the color of a debater's skin is an argument that should not be a win condition.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, my argument is any win condition that would be uh, destroyed or reversed if someone's color of skin were different as a debater should not be a win condition in the round.
Okay, so fugitivity should not be a win condition, is what you were saying.
If fugitivity in this round, if you're saying that is what fugitivity is, then absolutely it should not be a win condition. I don't
Wonderful.
believe that's what fugitivity is, though.
Okay. It's gonna be, like I said, the AF because I do vehemently believe that the negative is the AF, but I will sign piss. Okay, everyone good? Specifically for your flows, it's gonna start on the Reed Brinkley evidence. The DSRB evidence should end this debate. Two reasons. One, it says that even risks and failures of style are arguments in and of themselves, which means the affirmative is good and insurgent. Drop. Max says that literally nothing in second summary, and I know this strategy is probably to respond in second final. No, you've had three speeches to respond, and you just haven't. It's game over there. And then secondly, the way that we have framed the positioning of blogs is through fugitivity and maroonage. The negative is literally the affirmative minus fugitivity, which ends the debate because fugitivity is how the affirmative is contextualized to debate and how the affirmative accesses modes of insurgency. The concession in Crossfire that Mac does not access fugitivity means that there is literally no reason why the negative is more desirable than the affirmative. On this burden of rejoinder shit. Once again, we just did not say you have to negate the apple. You should be different from it, which is why we let you have your discourse and we intentionally conceded the discourse that you go for in the beginning. That is why you lose to the permutation. Your method is literally just the aft. And also, the second summary was beautiful with the way that it framed the radical possibility of moving things together and coalition building. But we don't get to do that because Mac is getting bodied on the theory of power debate, which cleans up all the other arguments on the flow. There's possibility for social life within social death, which is important because of the arguments that he makes about counterpublics. No, we do not represent our authors because it means that there are modes of covert resistance which operate as a mode of social life, which means that blogging is good, but also it means that black suffering is different and then cannot be centered on the same level as everything else. You want to talk about misrepresentation? Let's talk about Hartman. What you are showing here is definitively anti-black just because of things like ruse of analogy, which Hartman says is wrong. But then also the next argument on the flow is homogenization. mentioned this ad. Whoops, Mac, you did it again when you said that you get to engage in black debate, but you should lose for it is whack. Because once again, I said you don't get to engage in fugitivity, but you said you don't get to. You said we get to engage in black debate, but we should lose is exactly the argument that we are making. You keep conflating a black debate with fugitivity, which is a bad model of debate. They are two completely different things, which proves that when you try to censor too fucking much, you can't because you then become homogenizing. That is exactly what we are critiquing. However, they've conceded that the wish to become white is important because it embraces darkness. The affirmative itself is good. They've not proven the blog to be wrong, and that is enough to warrant a win condition for the affirmative.
Hartman, if you are able to bear the burden of what they have to bring, then there is a place for you inside the circle. The AF doesn't win for having a good monologue. This is a discussion. There are two voices, not one. We do this together. You should not vote for differential ballot access based on skin color. I agree that these things are different. Black debate is not fugitivity. That difference is what I have staked the round on. There's 3 reasons why we can engage in black debate, even if not fugitivity. The Reed Brinkley evidence says everyone should engage in black debate. 2, Hartman says that the course is open to everyone. And 3, McLaughlin says that we need to embrace obscure racial identities and not reject whiteness. We are co-authoring this debate together. We need to both multivocal encryption, which is our method, and fugitivity, which is their method. Without one, you can't win. Without this, you foreclose any productive participation in this debate from anyone who is non-white. Ask, if my skin color or Bashir's were different, would it change the ballot? If so, this destroys the ability to have any productive engagement. Imagine a world where this is how K-debate always works. I present a competing mechanism. Bashir says fugitivity is only accessible if you're black. There's no multivocality between this. There's no encryption as a result. Debate gets hijacked by the people at the powers that be, and K spaces get specifically decrypted and destroyed, which means this is the only risk of progress. But specifically, you have to adjudicate Bashir's blog in its entirety, not just the word fugitivity. After all, he said that in 1AC that this entire blog is the form, that is the method. We agree on the theory of power of Hartman, but his argument, his concession in Grand Crossfire, that intersectionality is bad, is terrible. This is a reverse homogenization, TA. Read Sadia Hartman. The entire book is about black women. They do not experience the same kinds of conditions as black men. Queerness, reproductive health, IPV, etc. are all things that also need to be centered in the discussion. Hartman says exactly this. There is space in the chorus, and there is space in this discussion. McGotten, let's clarify this. Yes, modes of resistance are important. No, they should not be counterpublics. That's the entire point of McGotten. That's the thesis of the article. Our encryption is the best way that we can actually create the encrypted black ops that they need for their method. Finally, Reed Brinkley, ours is also resistance. Ours is also performance. It does not say that fugitivity uniquely wins the risk, and it does not present any burden of rejoinder. It rejects it. We are apositional. We are different. There's never a warrant why we need to do anything different than this. All 3 say that multivocality is good. All 3 say that we should engage in this discussion together. That's what I've done. You should vote for me as a result. That's the only way to encrypt this space.
Great debate. Great debate.
Good debate. Whew, what did you think of the neg?
I think it was unexpected for sure. I'm sure you can tell. It's very organic. It was very unique. I do like it. I think it's very interesting. I am kind of like still a little. I mean, like I said, I kind of maintained the position throughout the round that the neg is the AF. But I guess in all honesty, now that the round is done, if I try my best, I can kind of see like the angle that you're going for about like how the affirmative, I guess, is just about black people, but the negative is multivocal is, I guess, the way that I can, or the way that I'm interpreting it. I'm not sure if
It's not quite that. It's not like we talk about non-black people, so we're better.
uh
The argument is that the it's actually an interesting argument about the burden of the negative in the round. It says that the role of the negative in this round is to build off of the affirmative and have a discussion together so that we co-author a blog, which means there's no rejoinder, there's no oppositionality between the AF or the neg. We're just doing something together. And that multivocality, the joining of your voice with my voice, is what encrypts the space.
Okay. Derek, Larry, did y'all have any thoughts about the debate? Larry, when you say the counterpublics argument, do you mean the one that the 1AC makes, or the way that Mac try to, like, I guess I'm gonna say spin because it's the policy word for it, but I guess co-opt or hijack, I guess. Okay, Mac, this sounds like a question directed at you then,
Yeah,
because
sure. I can explain it. So, um, this is. Are you okay with me pasting a part of the card in the chat? Cool. So this is the part of the card that Bashir cites. The part I don't know why it highlighted things like this. I don't think that's how you did it, which is weird. Maybe Zoom does
it's
it
not,
weirdly.
but it's also Zoom.
Yeah. So the part that Bashir is highlighting is, I guess, the very top of the part I pasted, which is past studies, position blogs as effectual counterpublics for marginalized communities responding to misrepresentation in the mainstream media and utilizing new discursive strategies. And then I am looking at the last line of this bit that says, I argue that examining the African American blogosphere as a counterpublic erases the important work of enclaved communities and satellite publics. So the way that I attempted to use this in the round was as a reason why the content of Bashir's blog is actually not so good and instrumentalizes authors or misunderstands the fundamental authors that are sort of the motivation for the blog in the first place. And that's a line that I tried to use going into Final Focus of like, I was gonna phrase it differently. The 2 minute speeches are crazy, man. But I was gonna try to pull some rhetorical thing that was like, Bashir is misrepresenting all three of the important authors. Like, let's look at McLaughlin, let's look at Reed Brinkley, let's look at Hartman. What do they actually say? And then I don't know. I guess I would have hoped that the judge would call for the cards and then read them in my favor instead of in Bashir's favor. But obviously, like interpretation of evidence is like a weird thing. So I think it would depend a lot, especially since both of us are sort of just like asserting back and forth that we're right about the interpretation in this round.
Yeah.
But this was a fun round. So I'll tell you the motivation for doing this, I guess. The main motivation was like, and it kind of evolved in a weird direction. The main motivation was just like, I was wondering what happened if like in PF, like there's a K and then just another K. And they like, there's nothing that competes between them. They're just different Ks, you know? Oh,
Yeah.
Derek, the multivocality thing is so it's described by Hartman as the chorus. The idea is like the best way to anonymize yourself and therefore encrypt your data is to sort of be a face in the crowd. You need a crowd to all speak with one voice. Well, I guess multivocally, but like into one big voice, one big maelstrom. This is something that is like comes up over and over and over again in Hartman's book about how like the one of the appeals of being in a chorus of people who are grieving, who are frustrated, who are talking about lots of different things, is that you sort of become anonymized in your participation in that chorus or in that dance. And so I was using it metaphorically as a method of encryption, if that makes sense. I was like, in this round, what I'm doing is I'm just joining the chorus that is started by the 1AC. The 1AC start singing, and then I come and sing along, maybe with different things. You know, not everyone in the chorus that Hartman's book is about are talking about the same grievance. Some of them are talking about lost children. Some of them are talking about lots of different things, right? They all have different experiences. But it's the joining of those voices into one coherent chorus is powerful and also is a form of encryption that makes the space kind of undiscernible to people who want to break it down. And the argument that I'm making is debate needs to be, a K debate specifically, needs to be encrypted in some way, because otherwise you get like the example I gave in the 1NC is like the video with like 600,000 views of like the conservative talking about K debate and PF. And the argument I'm making is like if it gets too decrypted in this way, and if we aren't multivocal enough, if we're too oppositional, if we're too much, speaking our own stuff and not joining into the conversation that the other person is engaging in, then it becomes too decrypted, and you risk debate or K debate specifically being obliterated by the state or by powers that be.
Mac, I will say it's kind of devious quoting Mac Hayes. If that is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'll stand by that quote, but yeah, I'm not using it.
It's not like a theory of power claim or anything. Like it's
Oh
not
yeah,
like
no.
a controversy.
That would be whack if I was like, actually, black people are not socially dead. Matt Case says so. Uh, but yeah, I really enjoyed this round. This was, I mean, I felt like it was a fun, creative experience for me. I hope it was for you as well.
It was
I think,
awesome. I really enjoyed it.
like, I really do feel like we kind of embodied what I was trying to get at through the round, where we were kind of like jointly
Yeah.
engaging in some kind of creative
I
process,
think
which was fun.
the weird thing about these is I do genuinely believe that you are right about the burden of rejoinder not being a thing in public forum,
Hmm.
which is what makes my strategy, I guess, in this debate very different
Yeah,
from um how I would have engaged with this negative if it was a policy debate.
yeah.
Um, very, very coincidentally, actually, my first ever college policy round against Wake MP, we read our Hartman General Strike Aff, to which I don't think that they were fully prepared to because they didn't know what the AF was. Obviously, it was the first round of the season opener, but they happened to respond to us coincidentally with a Hartman General Strike Neg. Um,
Crazy. So it's kind of like this.
yeah, and that debate was quite like e- I don't want to say easy because
Right.
they were quite good at debate,
Yeah.
but it was a lot easier to navigate because it was easier to make arguments. So it's like, for example, KVK debate is good, but
Yeah.
technically this isn't neg v af because the
Yeah.
neg doesn't
Yeah,
good.
yeah. And that's, yeah, I was weird because I was, at some point, I realized I should just say, I don't want KVK debate. Like,
Yeah,
I want K plus K debate, which I guess is what I'm trying to do here.
yeah.
But yeah, like this whole thing started out of just a curiosity of mine of like, what the heck happens if both sides just read like their own K? Especially, it might have been even different if like if legitimately this K had honestly been prepared for something other than responding to your K. Like I feel like it creates a really weird thing
Well,
in
the weird
PF.
is with PF specifically, I think the trajectory that Ks are taking is a lot of them tend to lean towards identity. A
Right.
lot of things, which, for the better or worse, the product of that is that a lot of debates are just K and other K debate. Because, for example, when a team reads like, let's say a fem K and the other responds with like a transphobia K, um, yes, they are different. There is no real comparison or rejoinder between them. And so
Exactly.
I
Right.
think this round did kind of demonstrate how a lot of
Yeah.
those debates would look.
Yeah. 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 It's really interesting. Like I feel like because I guess what happened is like you kind of pivoted away from burdens type arguments. I assumed that you were going to go hard for like burden of rejoinder, which is clearly what I kind of prepped. But then I guess the natural inclination is to pivot away from that into more like I don't know. I want to call it independent voter territory, but like more like things that are separate, right? Like why you get exclusive access to a method that I don't get access to, for example. Things like I guess like trying to trying to tear apart the togetherness of the case that I've tried to make. Like I was like, we're all in this together, bro, and you're like, no, this is not true at all. Like this is
I
completely
think I
different.
think honestly is kind of crazy to go for um there is no burden of rejoinder, we don't have to be different kind of like angle
Yeah,
to it. I definitely wasn't expecting it. I think maybe it would have maybe made more sense for me to go for like a no, there is a burden of rejoinder,
yeah,
but I guess, like you said, when we were talking about this a couple days ago or yesterday, it is about the gut reaction, and my gut
yeah,
reaction was to go for like well, this card is something that I guess creates competition, whether you want there to be competition or not.
right, right, right. It's really interesting. Do you want to run? So we'll run another round of the K.
Hundred.
Do you want that round to be a different strategy against the K first? That will be inevitable regardless. Or do you want it to be a redo of this round?
I think that is entirely up to you. I think maybe if you post this round, you get some reactions to it. We'll see how people think or how confused they are about this debate, and if required, we can do a
Yeah,
redo on it. But I'm always happy and down to debate whatever you want to debate. I think honestly, even given like adequate prep time, like even if I have like a week or whatever to start thinking about a response to this one and see, I think it would just be a more polished version of the same argument because I don't
yeah,
think there's like I don't think I would take a like you should
yeah.
have a rejoinder argument
Okay,
stand.
that's interesting. Yeah. I would be interested, even if it is not like the next round that we do, to at some point redo this round. I won't
Yeah,
make any changes to the one and see if we do so. Um,
100%. We could also hypothetically do it at the AI summer camp.
That is also true. Or the winter camp or the summer camp. Well, the summer camp, the summer camp. We don't have a winter camp. I was thinking about something else. But yeah, dude, that would be lit. I'm down. I feel like iterating on the same rounds over and over again is something that I don't see happening a lot, and I feel like it's an underrated thing. Like I feel like that's a lot of where like really interesting things happen. Larry, for you, the thing that I was hinging on was honestly presumption. Like my strategy was to basically have two layers, right? Like if it's impossible to determine who wins and we're both just having a nice chat together, and just doing stuff together and no one has claim to any offense. It's just sort of like there exists offense and then there exists us and then it's completely separate. Then I would hope that the judge would vote negative. That's a hope that I would have to sort of hinge
I
on. And
think
if like there's a chance that they default AF too.
I think how a more performance like oriented policy judge would evaluate this, and I have some names that I'm thinking of right now based off how they've judged me. I think, Larry, the answer to that question is that there is no objective answer to that question. How performance debate works, I think, is at some point people become so deep into debate that they stop becoming tech over truth and that they start just caring a lot more about persuasion, right? And I think that is why I tried my best to kind of give Mac his flowers that the rhetoric was extremely persuasive, regardless of whether I was trying my best to respond to it or whether I thought that it was true or not. I think that the way that it was spun and the way that it was framed was extremely persuasive, and I think that's what a lot of these judges want, right? Like, for example, an RFD in this debate that would have voted negative would not be, I presumed, or even I think the negatives offense outweighs the affirmatives, or the affirmative has not won um like any offense, but it would rather just be I think that it is important to have a dialogue. How do you weigh that? How is that an argument in the debate is not really something that there is an objective answer to. However, the whole point of performance is kind of to de-gamify debate and to stop thinking of debate as like a technically how do I determine who won, but rather what does the performance signify and is this something that I want to endorse?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was just thinking about this. Like, I think that ballot becomes a lot less convincingly negative if you explicitly agree that like we should have a discussion and then you engage. Like, that would be a I don't know, like a mind fuck if you were like, yes, we are having a discussion. You don't have to rejoin me. I don't have to rejoin you. Let me continue this constructive dialogue. And
Yeah,
then, like then it's weird. I feel like with performance, things like ground is a really weird concept. It's very fuzzy. It's like ground becomes solidified as one side or another when there is controversy over it, right? Like because Bashir said essentially no, like this shouldn't just be a discussion. Here's like the methods are not something that you can just take and discuss. That created a sort of ground division in this round that might make such an RFD coherent. But if that hadn't happened, I wonder like the RFD would have to be very different, I think.
I agree.
So I
I
guess,
think
yeah,
honestly evaluating anything becomes a lot more difficult when both teams kind of agree to it.
right. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess the lesson, the takeaway is like careful what you disagree with. It might like allow it to be their ground.
Yeah. But another very important thing that I would like to add to this is Mac's method is kind of how performance debate works in general. Like things about we should have a dialogue are things that a lot of people do kind of try to spin angles to. For example, it is very common in college policy for teams to read a negative off case position that does not have a single word to it. It is like, for example, literally like a piano tune or like just a selfie. I watched a debate in the Iowa round robin where one of the off-case positions was just um, basically a sequence of photos from the 2N that was just them taking selfies of themselves. And arguing that that then is a rejoinder of the affirmative. Obviously, that is a different scenario because that is required in policy. But the way that these things work is the moment that you stop thinking of debate as a game, but rather start thinking of it as like a site of performance, not the debate is not a game, but rather the debate is more than a game and that it has radical potential, the less RFDs become, or I guess rounds themselves become about who is winning the most coherent piece of offense, but rather talking to another person being the judge and just trying to convey their performance and why that matters to said judge.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's like a weird division between theory and practice. Like you can say that a method is effective, but then it's a whole other story to like act out that method in the round in some way. And I guess we kind of both tried to do that in this round. Like I certainly was attempting, I guess like my very participation in the round was attempting to be multivocal in some way. But it's weird. It's like there's yeah, it's a really murky territory in my mind, which is I think intentional. Like it doesn't have all these rules and procedures that I think traditional like policy debate does. But it's really cool. I had a lot of fun engaging in it.
Yeah, I thought it was a great debate. Yeah, I'd love to do another one of these at some point.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna end the recording.